Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The FCC is circulating a notice of proposed rulemaking about CBRS spectrum and changes to the spectrum sharing rules for that. They've been working with the Navy. I'll be right back with some details and also to explain a little bit about how CBRS works and how that spectrum sharing works. Hang on for just a moment, be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So I've linked to these documents in the description of the video. So you see here, FCC Chairwoman proposes proceeding to update Citizens Broadband Radio Service rules. And I'm going to just pick out a few little things out of these documents. Some of it's a little technical. Well, some of it's very technical. To just let you know that this is going on. It's something that the FCC's going to be looking at and voting on soon, and then I'm sure these changes will go into place. And it can really benefit broadband around the country because CBRS, because of the spectrum sharing, the way it's done, it does limit purposely the number of people that could have access to spectrum in certain areas because of how it needs to be shared. But they're looking at, and this is probably due to maybe having it in play for a period of time where they've determined that they can loosen up some of the spectrum sharing rules as far as the technical portions of that to help make that available to more folks. So again, I want to look at that and also, like I say, kind of explain how the spectrum sharing works, because it's really kind of interesting and unique the way that they've started doing this. And I think additional spectrum that will be out will be using a similar paradigm as far as how to share that. So you see here the 3.5 gigahertz band, that's what they call it. And this is in the really sweet spot for 5G spectrum. You've got of course wireless spectrum that's not this fast, and because of that, that's what we were used to with 2G and 3G service and 4G service, but 5G, really for something to be 5G, it needs to be faster. So you've got this mid-band spectrum. Now on the high end, you have millimeter wave spectrum, and it's really fast. But the problem with millimeter wave spectrum is it's very easily attenuated. So you have to have line of sight, which is why you have to have lots of small cells that all have line of sight to each other. Then you need line of sight to wherever the signal is going. Any trees in the way will interrupt that, and even humidity in the air can be a problem for millimeter wave spectrum. So like I say, this is a sweet spot where the spectrum, it can go through walls. You don't need line of sight. It's still very fast from the perspective of fixed wireless service. So the FCC has been trying to free up more mid-band spectrum. And then, back in, I think it was June, I believe, of 2020, there was an auction to auction off CBRS spectrum. And they put all of the sharing parameters in place. So it's something that had been worked on even prior to that. It had been worked on like 8 to 10 years. They were working on how to do this. So the 3.5 gigahertz band uses a 3-tiered access and authorization model that protects incumbent access users, allows for geographically licensed operations following the FCC's 2020 auction of priority access licenses, and permits opportunistic licensed by rule general authorized access use. I'm going to explain all that. So if I've already lost you, hang on. I'll be explaining some of this. So the NPRM, a notice of proposed rulemaking, would allow or would also propose to sunset rules related to the transition of grandfathered wireless broadband services in the 3.65 to 3.7 gigahertz band, and that's the top 50 megahertz of that band. That's where we had some fixed wireless access providers that were in that band prior to CBRS spectrum coming out and prior to all these spectrum sharing that was going to be done in this band. So we had some grandfathered folks in there. So I'll talk about that as well. So and then this other document, just a little bit. This was just all dated yesterday. So. You see here, what's today? Today is the 14th, yeah. So this is a press release, basically. And then you've got similar public notice press release. FCC, NTIA, Navy work. FCC, NTI, and Navy work to expand innovative 3.5 gig spectrum sharing framework. So it's basically the same thing, although there's a few more details in here. So again, the FCC U.S. Department of Commerce's National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or the NTIA. These are the same folks that are administering BEAD. And the Department of the Navy have successfully collaborated to expand the unencumbered service area of a critical swath of shared mid-band spectrum, and successfully collaborated, but still needs to circulate through the FCC and be voted on. And then after that, there will be a comment period where interested parties can comment, that kind of thing. So it's got to go through the usual process. Modifications to the aggregate interference model used in the 3.5 gig band would allow the Citizens Broadband Radio Service, or CBRS, to provide uninterrupted access to mid-band spectrum that supports wireless internet and other services to approximately 72 million more people. So that's what they're saying. These changes will open up, as far as CBRS, that 72 million more people will be able to get access to CBRS service if there's a service provider in those areas that chooses to provide service using it. So, the innovative approach of the CBRS is a win-win. The Department of Defense has airwaves it needs to carry out crucial missions while providing greater access for commercial 5G and high-speed internet deployment. When they say commercial, they don't necessarily mean commercial as in businesses. They mean residential and business broadband subscribers that could use the CBRS spectrum. CBRS, established by FCC rules in 2015 in coordination with the NTI and Department of Navy, allows for dynamic spectrum sharing, the 3.5 gig band, between the Department of Defense and commercial spectrum users. DoD users have protected, prioritized use of the spectrum. When the government isn't using the airwaves, companies and the public can gain access through a tiered framework. So that's a big part of how this works, is this dynamic spectrum sharing, and it's got to be very dynamic and very fast. This means the DoD can use the same spectrum for its critical missions, while companies and the public can use it for next-generation wireless services, including 5G. The changes would authorize, again, approximately 72 more million people to get this, to expand the total unencumbered of CBRS to area to roughly 240 million people nationwide. It's a lot of people. Population affected by these changes is distributed throughout the country, with the most notable estimated increases occurring in the states listed below. So you see here the states that you've got. And as you see these states, well, you got Oklahoma in there, but a lot of them you'll notice tend to be close to the ocean in areas, or let's say the Gulf, because again, it's the Navy. So the Navy, a lot of what they're going to be doing is going to be clustered around the ocean or the Gulf, as I say, and not necessarily inland. Although we do have, there are going to be Navy bases or whatnot, or Navy installations in other places. You do see Oklahoma here, and you've got Nevada. So it's not everywhere, but that's why you would see, I think, the greatest increase of people that can be impacted, because you've got a lot of Navy ships operating in some of these areas where you wouldn't have ships operating in near Oklahoma or Nevada. So I think that's what we're seeing there. Then we've got the public notice here, Wireless Telecom Bureau and Office modify aggregate interference model, blah, 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 okay. And again, here specifically as described in the June 11th, 2024 letter, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau and OET, Office of Engineering and Technology, permit certified SAS administrators, I'll explain what a SAS administrator is in a moment here, to modify the existing aggregate interference model by adding time division duplex and loading factors accounting for clutter loss, and using a 50% confidence factor and 50% reliability factor for the propagation loss calculations. Okay, I'm not going to explain all that other than to say this is something that, again, maybe through practice of having CBRS deployed out there, that they've realized they can make some of these changes, which would decrease the likelihood of interference with Navy operations, and that's what they're going to be doing. So SAS administrators will be permitted to apply the changes to the aggregate interference model used to protect federal operations in the band only after demonstration, including testing in a non-operational environment, of their ability to effectively implement these changes and subsequent approval by the WTB and OET. And then again, there's WTB and OET will allow SAS administrators to apply it specific changes to the aggregate interference model used to protect federal operations in the 3.5 gig band, and then it's got what those changes are here, which again, I'm not going to read through it because it's really technical. You don't probably need to know that, but I wanted to make sure you were aware of it. And then this just note in here that it describes DPAs, and again, I will kind of illustrate what a DPA is as well. DPAs are predefined protection areas that extend beyond the coastline or that enclose a protected terrestrial radar facility, which may be activated or deactivated as necessary to protect DoD radar systems, Department of Defense radar systems. And in general, when a DPA is activated, SASs may direct CBSDs, those are citizen broadband devices, I think, in a DPA neighborhood to cease operations, reduce transmit power, or relocate to a non-interfering frequency in order to protect federal operations in the band. So that's a mouthful that I hope you will now understand once I go through this. I've got a few slides to hopefully explain this. So stand by here while I launch that, and hopefully this will make some sense for you. All right, so what again, we hear Citizens Broadband Radio Service. So I think of Citizens Band Radio Service, CB radios, right? But it's not that. So it's not that, good buddy. It is Citizens Broadband Radio Service. So back, if you grew up when I did, this was all the rage. So it really was the in thing back in the 70s. So you had moms, I would say soccer moms, but soccer was not the big thing back then. So maybe football moms in their station wagons with simulated wood siding had CB radios, and they were on there. Hey, good buddy, this is football mom, whatever. So it was a lot of fun, CB radios, but it was a fad. But it's not that. So CBRS, Citizens Broadband Radio Service. So it's 150 meg of spectrum, and it's in the 3.5 gig band, as we've talked about. So specifically, it's the 3550 megahertz to 3700 megahertz. And the FCC, again, they worked with this consortium of stakeholders back then to make this spectrum sharing available in this really kind of a unique model that allows the Department of Defense, the Navy, to operate in this band along with, as they say, commercial providers, which again would be just anybody providing to residential or business internet customers. So they've got three different tiers that were mentioned in some of those documents I was looking at. So first, you've got your incumbent users, and this would be the Navy. This is the Department of Defense. You've got also some fixed satellite service, space to Earth, kind of Earth stations that I think are still involved there. We had C-band. C-band spectrum was a lot of satellite service that needed to be relocated. That was in a band, I believe, a little above this one. So I think these are still incumbents that are in there. And then there's the grandfathered wireless broadband providers, the WISPs that were in the upper 50 megahertz of this band. So again, it goes up to, 3,700? I think it was. So kind of an upper 50 megahertz of that. You've got these grandfathered guys, and they were supposed to be out by, I think, depending on when their lease was up, I think it was sometime in 2023 is when the last of these would be out of this. And the notices that we were looking at, I don't think I covered it, but one of them talks about, I think it mentioned the grandfathers, and I think in that context it was talking about sunsetting the rules for that. So maybe sunsetting that because they all should be out of this band now. So there should be no more grandfathered WISPs in here. They gave them some time to be able to change the equipment that they had, because the equipment they had needed to change so that they could handle the 5G spectrum and the spectrum sharing requirements. So that's the incumbent users. These are the most important ones, and these are the ones, especially the incumbents here, not the grandfather guys, but specifically the Navy, where others that are using this spectrum need to back off if the Navy is using it. And then you've got your primary access licenses. These are for operators that decided they wanted to license CBRS spectrum. And you see here, this operates in the lower 100 megahertz. So it should not interfere with the Navy folks. So these guys should have access to their spectrum at all times, and they are, in a sense, priority over the next level. So they should not be interfering. If I'm remembering where the spectrum lives, they should not be interfering with that. And then you've got general authorized access, or GAA. And this is all I have on here unlicensed spectrum from when I originally made this slide, but really it's now called licensed by rule, because in the BEAD program you've got what they define as reliable broadband service, and that's got to be a specific kind of broadband service. And that would include cable modem service, fiber, obviously, that would be the preference. DSL, for some weird reason, is still considered reliable broadband service, even though if there's DSL out there, it's probably not going to meet the speeds that are necessary, and certainly it's not for the future. And fixed wireless, in the notice of funding opportunity, it says fixed wireless if it's licensed spectrum or partially licensed and partially unlicensed spectrum, I guess, in the same area is how that's supposed to work. But that kind of left out CBRS. CBRS is mid-band spectrum. It's good spectrum, but it is available in this general unauthorized access. And again, unlicensed from the perspective of you don't need to get a license for it, but you do need to be, in a sense, registered that you're using it. But it's not like you were paying a license. I believe the PALs here, they had to pay for the licenses that they have, and they do get that priority access. But the general authorized access, unlicensed, but again, the NTIA or the FCC or somebody, whoever defined it this way, probably the NTIA, since they're responsible for BEAD, could have been FCC, I don't know, call it now licensed by rule. So this, because it's licensed by rule now, because they define CBRS as that, then this would now be considered licensed spectrum. Even though you have people in here that don't get a license to use it, it's part of the spectrum sharing of CBRS, and therefore, even if you're using this spectrum, you don't have a license up here, it's licensed by rule. So this would qualify as reliable broadband service under BEAD. So you see your unlicensed spectrum, and this can operate throughout this whole spectrum here. But there's no expectation of interference protection like there would be, let's say, for the PALs or for the incumbent users. The incumbent user, again, being the Navy, who's we're talking about here. So that's the kind of the spectrum sharing. And now how does this work technically? So, well, first we've got these SASs that were talked about. So you need a database of who's using the spectrum, and you need somebody to kind of be the policeman as far as, again, who's using the spectrum, who needs to back off when you've got interference, congestion, or whatever, a collision, and somebody needs to back off. That's what these SASs will do. So there are several that were approved to be SASs. So you got Amdocs, Keybridge, Sony, Google, CommScope, and then Federated Wireless. Google and CommScope were kind of going to be doing it on their own at one point, but then I think CommScope decided to work with Google, and then CommScope said, we really don't want to be a SAS, but we'll continue to do I believe the technology on the back end. So Google is really, I think, the SAS, but CommScope's doing maybe some of the technical stuff as far as the wireless goes. So these are your SASs, Spectrum Access System. And they, again, if you're going to be providing CBRS, you've got to work with one of these in order to make sure that you can get the information you need to be able to do the spectrum sharing. Who's using the spectrum? Can I use it right now? Can I use it if you have to back off? When can I use it? And the way that works is you've got along the coast, let's say, mostly along the coast, because again, this is Navy ships that are mostly the issue. You've got installed what are called environmental sensing capability, or ESCs. And what these do is when a ship comes close, then these ESCs will sense that, and then they need to communicate with the I think it's with the SASs who have the database, who then need to make sure that the spectrum sharing takes place so that there's no interference. So you can see there's lots of technical parameters for how high towers can be. Here you've got your CBS transmitter. This would be, I believe, basically your operator that's got a antenna. So they are the ones that, let's say, for example, would get turned off if a ship is coming in and these ESCs see that ship is coming in. So to kind of make it more graphical here, this is another acronym that was mentioned in there, DPAs, Dynamic Protection Areas. So you get your DPAs, and you can see these are kind of here clustered around the coast. And of course, if we've got Nevada and Oklahoma, there must be DPAs there as well that maybe are surrounding naval bases that happen to be, naval base, that happen to be inland, where they're doing naval operations. And I guess you'd have the same thing where you'd have like a DPA in that area. So what happens again is you've got these ESCs along the coast. These are your ESCs, let's say, and these are your CB, I forget what the acronym was, but basically your antennas. These are your operator antennas that are out there serving the public with CBRS spectrum. So your ship is out there, and if the ship comes in to this DPA, then the ESC senses that, and then the ESC has to communicate with the operators that are using that spectrum. First, it's the ESC. It basically puts a hold on this whole DPA, and then at that point, it then again communicates here with these operators, and it tells them, hey, you got to get off of this spectrum, or you need to change how strong your signal is. There were several things mentioned in there, and this is, I think, this is a big part of what may be changing here as far as the rules, so that this will happen less often, so that these ESCs will be triggered less often, or even I think the reason it's going to add more people is that you could get closer in here and be able to have people use CBRS sharing, and maybe have more folks that are along the coast, for example, using CBRS spectrum, whereas before maybe there was exclusion zones that were bigger. So this takes place, and then suddenly these operators have to, whoever was using that, like if you were on the internet using one of these towers, then they're going to have to switch you to, let's say, another portion of the band so that you can continue to operate while the Navy operates on their exclusive band that's for, at the very top there for the incumbents. Now, that's all supposed to take place very quickly, like within a minute or less, so that it all takes place and you would not really experience the fact that the ship comes in and then you get switched pretty quickly, and you're not really going to notice that difference going from one place to another. That all needs to take place very, very quickly. So the ship is then operating. This DPA is then closed off for that period of time. And again, it's not like these are off the air. It's just that they have switched people to, they've changed something that's going to allow the Navy and you, if you're one of the customers here, to operate on that CBRS spectrum, but in a different area of the spectrum, or maybe at a lower speed or frequency or something like that. So they're gonna intervene and make sure that you are not interfering with the Navy's operations. That's what this is all about. And then, of course, when the Navy is done, they will then clear out. The ESC will sense that, and they'll open that DPA back up, and then therefore there's no more need to be, you can get put back where you were before, in a sense. So that is what is going on there. And that, I think, will help you understand, as you look at those documents, what they're trying to do. Although technically there's a lot more there, obviously, on the technical changes that they need to make. But it's very interesting, again, how they're doing the sharing. And hopefully that has helped you understand how CBRS works. It is something that, especially back then, was unique. And I think any future spectrum like this that they bring forward, if they're opening up new additional midband spectrum, will be using very similar, probably the same technologies, same what are they called? Forget, SAS or whatever, that are sensing the spectrum, and then the databases, ESCs, and then the database administrators that are taking care of that. It's all going to be reused, and again, it's a way to be able to open up spectrum that otherwise would have been locked out because the Navy was using it, because that was always the concern, right? It's like, well, we can't use this because the Navy's using that. Well, now operators can use it, and the Navy can use it, and they can share it, and it provides benefits for everyone. The Navy can continue to use it, and the public gets access to more high-speed fixed wireless broadband services, and mobile broadband as well, if people are using it for that, for 5G. So, but generally, CBRS is going to be for your fixed wireless providers. So this is something that's needed because, again, as BEAD moves forward, there are going to be areas of the country that, and areas and states that are just not really going to be able to do fiber, and fixed wireless is your next best bet. If you can't get, and I say that if you can't get wired service. So if you've got, no wired service now, or maybe you've got DSL and it's phone lines, but it would cost a fortune in certain areas to get fiber up a mountain. You might have a phone line up there, but to get fiber up there to a minimum number of homes, it's going to be really expensive. And fixed wireless and CBRS midband spectrum, especially midband, because again, it's going to propagate much better than millimeter wave, and it's still fast enough to be useful. So CBRS is a really good option to have in places like that. So Thanks for joining me today. If you learned something, if you'd give me a thumbs up, I'd appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, ring the bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live with content like this and other kinds of broadband news. I will see you next time for Broadband Deployment News. Take care. Bye-bye.